I've been looking into this a lot on the performance side of things and the influence of placebo on performance. And there's actually a study that I found that's like is pretty fucking hilarious, but it was done in 2000. It was called the Clark et al. Study. Uh, and what happened is they took a bunch of powerlifters and sprinters that performed at the national level. So they're not like untrained Joe Schmoes that get their pastry in the morning. These are like people that have been competing and probably have some sort of significant training age. And they put them on a drug that, well, they seemingly put them on steroids. They told them that they were giving them steroids for a period of time, and they did not. These were 100% placebo. They gave steroids to no one. So they took a baseline of performance before and after. They told them that they were on steroids, and every single person in that study performed 3 to 5% better in the period in which they believed that they were on steroids. But the other side of this is that they then, for a period of time, they monitored performance and they told them that it was just placebo and they were not on steroids. And every single person, their performance dropped off in that amount of time, that they now realize that they were not on steroids. So that it builds a case to show how powerful placebo is in performance athletes. And I mean, you and I have both worked with a lot of athletes that perform at a very high level, and there is this kind of ritualistic, like very superstitious kind of belief system around like processes or performance or the things that they do at that level that, you know, maybe has a larger impact than a lot of people realize. Is that if people believe that these things are going to make them perform better, a lot of times they do, even if the thing itself isn't what's helping them. It's the belief that this thing will help them and the confidence in that that actually can improve performance.
Yeah, yeah. So hold on. The study was done with powerlifters.
Powerlifters and sprinters.
Oh, and sprinters. Okay, all right. So there's
Mhm.
a real athlete in there somewhere. That's good. Yeah, I mean, look, the power of mind is a pretty wild thing, and I'd be curious to know subjectively, or even just to get your thoughts on what do you think it is that because here's how I shake it down is okay. They are under the assumption that what they're taking is some sort of performance enhancing drug,
Mhm.
and but at the end of the day, you still have to train. Right?
Yeah.
That's now, if anyone who's never taken performance enhancing drugs or has, or knows people who have, or knows people who have trained natural, like the thing that I think we could all say is drugs work, right? Because there's this annoying camp of people who take PEDs that are like, well, PEDs actually make it harder. Like, shut the fuck up, dude! Like you just no, like just stake, just stop. So it's like, you know, I because it to me psychology trumps physiology, and I think anyone who's competed in a sport knows that. And psychology to me in the performance space has a driver. It's something they can call by name. There's a great book by a gentleman named Todd Herman called Alter Ego, who is like he kind of worked with Kobe to come up with like the Mamba mentality, and there's similar psychological approaches to improving performance. But I think Todd put a really good spin on it with that book. And so, what I want to know is what is the mindset and like to and your opinion on what is the exact thought that is going in someone says, so let's take a sprinter, they're let's keep it in the realm of conventional lifting. They're going in to do a squat session or a weight session. They're either approaching a weight that they haven't done before, or they're reaching a predetermined fatigue point that they would usually hit prior to administering said drug. What do you think it is in their head? Because this is where the effect is having, right? Do you think it's I can do this because I'm on the drug, or I will be able to recover from this because of said drug? Like, where do you think the exact, like, okay, I'm now under the assumption that I have this foreign agent acting in my body. I'm about to go do the thing that I have to do that I've been doing before that has made me a good athlete. There has to be a belief that stems from something
Hmm.
that in order for them to attempt the thing. Because if you take drugs and you just kind of like your training is like the same and you hit the same reps and the same weight, then you're like likely, there may be some like androgenic effect or something like that, but you're likely going to just perform the same if like your weights don't change. So what do you think it is in the mind of someone who's participating in this study? Like, or maybe what would you think it would be like? Oh, I do I feel like I can and I'm empowered? Do I feel like I always could, but I didn't because I couldn't recover? Like where does your mind go in assessing that ability?
It, it goes a lot of places, but I think if I were to sum it up into literally one word, it would be perception. Because training is so monotonous, especially at a high level. You have just a nauseating amount of time that goes into perfecting one specific skill or kind of a series of skills that make up a sport. And a lot of times high performers, if we're talking like national level collegiate athletes, then that's someone that's probably has on average about a decade, probably more, maybe a decade and a half of training lifetime of training age and experience in doing that. And I'm sure there's been certain progressions along the way, but as you and I have seen, like strength and conditioning it's still pretty old school on most levels. Like when you make it from one tier to the next, like from like youth to high school or like high school to collegiate, there's steps up in terms of abilities and attention to detail and technical competence and physical competence, yes, but largely a lot of the training is very similar. So you're used to just kind of the same thing day in day out. And even on a more mild perspective, that's like not drugs or something that actually has a physiological capability to improve performance. Like how many times have you seen someone get like a new pair of shoes and they'll like really latch to that idea that like they get a new pair of shoes and their performance is better on that day? And it's like they form this belief that like, oh, it was the shoes that made me perform that much better. And that probably has next to zero actual correlation to their performance, but there was something around their perception that this is different now. I have changed something around my interaction with this game, with this play surface, with the way that I respond to the stimulus that has caused a positive correlation with the way that I feel around my performance. And that change, that it might be very very small, um, like uh, I was just working with someone who like literally just put one extra like layer of grip tape on her tennis racket, and that was something that like it was enough of a change that she perceived that something was different, something was better. And that's like, in reality, that probably has zero effect on the game or anything, but the thing it is affecting is the perception around that. So in this particular study, like I think their perception of their capabilities, they're like even like very literally RPE, rate of perceived exertion. Like it may change their perception of exertion or their perception of themselves and their capabilities. And I think that's the thing, because there's even in a study like in a few weeks time, it's not really enough time to change someone's overall capabilities, right? Maybe a minuscule amount. But I think the thing that most people have that is their biggest unlocked potential for improved performance is mentality and perception, right? It's dealing with negative self-talk or self-doubt or their perception of where they're at in their career or the external stressors that are weighing on them. So if you could change their perception on that with something that maybe it doesn't do much, but it does change their perception or their mentality, then maybe that allows them to be less reserved in areas that will improve their performance. And I think that's kind of the root of anything that is more um, placebo based or subjective in terms of performances. If you can change their perception of their ability to perform, I think it changes their ability to perform, period.
Yeah, I wonder if you couldn't standardize across another intervention that could have been perceived to give you such a positive change. Like, uh, this group is going to take PEDs. This group is going to get coached by like the best coach in the entire world, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like I think of the Hawthorne effect. I'm pretty sure it's the Hawthorne effect, where they did a study. I want to say this was like wartime days, where the industrial revolution, everyone's working in factories, humans are sort of the cogs in these machines, and they wanted to uh, see if brightness in the factory equated for an increase in work output. And so they started incrementally increasing the brightness in the facility. And then they kept increasing it, increasing and increasing it. And like productivity went up and up and up. And then all of a sudden they started decreasing it as productivity still went up. And so the tether wasn't to the brightness, the tether was to the change.
Mhm.
And that the fact that we're introducing a new potential future reality to this equation. And I would be so curious to know because on a a biochemical level, a metabolic level, if we're not introducing these hormones, these androgens, these anabolics into the equation, then there's nothing happening, right? Like it's just whatever they use as a placebo, fucking extra virgin olive oil, whatever the fuck it is. But I wonder if you can control for the perception of potency based off of someone's belief of the improvement. Like, someone needs a better coach and they think that, a better coach is better than drugs. Does that, does like their implicit bias towards the potential magnitude of the intervention then dictate the efficacy? It's almost like the studies that were done around different types of drugs and the vehicle of administration, right?
Mhm.
So, like, if you administered a drug in like, yeah, I think Tylenol or Advil is famous for this, like the gel cap over a regular cap or a tab. It's like, oh, I can see the drug in the thing, and there's a different effect, and that scales up to like injectable drugs and things and IVs and things like that, where it's like if you equate for and standardize for bioavailability of the drug, then there's no difference at the level of physiological response, but a psychological response of taking a tablet versus a capsule versus a gel capsule versus a liquid versus an injectable carries with it this sense of severity of the intervention that doesn't scale to the level of bioactivity of the actual drug in the system, but it scales to the psychological perception. I wonder if you couldn't find out what, or if you were to find out what do people think the most potent lever is. Now I can tell you in the sport of powerlifting that people think the most potent lever is drugs. And that's true. Famously said by a handful of my former competitors is no one gets a trophy for taking less. But coaching, periodization, these things, where even if standardized, if controlled, if a complete quote unquote sham, as you were, which is the technical term, were to be applied, and the same program were to be given from, some auto generator fucking AI thing, and that same program then be said to have come from Ed Cohn or Dave Tate or Louis Simmons, may he rest in peace. It's like, would they get the better result? And could you then tie the result to the power of the belief and then start to rank order someone's belief around the potency of this projected future reality as brought forth by this intervention? Because I think obviously that's what's at play here, because if there's no physiological effect, it's all on the psychological. So I just think I'd be curious if you could tease out for that and then control for it and intervene accordingly. Be like, oh, okay, like you value coaching more than you value nutrition or drugs or whatever it is, and be like, all right, well, this coach's program. Oh, really?
Mhm.
Really? You think? So it's an interesting study, but I think like the I mean, how'd you put it? Perception. Like my take would be like belief. Like what is belief? What constitutes belief? And because the odd thing is, and then we know this to be true of athletes across the board, is that the belief always has to be in something external to them.
Mm.
Like, and I think that's what separates the good from the great. The really good athletes, trust me, like they don't look like they're on performance enhancing drugs, because
Yeah.
the number one performance enhancing drug they have is like a belief in themselves.